Good morning and welcome to Equity Story Trade Watch. Thursday today, and we had some ridiculous, really amazing performances overnight in the US where the market rallied. So we'll talk about that. We'll talk about what actually drove that. Have a look at some stories that had some news this morning and see where some of these trades and some of these themes are actually heading at the moment. Before I start, just Equity Story disclaimer for everyone to see. Everything we talk about on our videos pretty much has to do with the technicals of a given story, and we're looking also at the fundamentals of given story. All right, so let's have a look at this. Where they had a big rally on the US and saying that where are we going from here? What's actually driving all this stuff? And for me, really, the key driver has been, first of all, the Fed's raising its rates. Well, we expected that, right? So we knew that there's going to be movement at the station from that point of view, and Powell's delivered, and pretty much within expectation. So a bit of a relief rally for me, but looks of things. The Nasdaq really surged pretty strongly, so a bit of bottom feeding, so to speak, looking for the bargains that a lot of those American tech stocks, here in Australia as well, have been way oversold. So there's been a bit of relief rally coming through there. Is it sustainable? I'm not so sure. Also, I suppose the Fed has been quite positive on the economy, and also talked about that they are going to be raising rates further. Now, how long this rally will last, I've got no idea. It potentially could be just a quick relief. Thank you very much. We're going to buy some cheap stories before it reverts to, because we still got to remember that we still got the issues of how far of this inflation is going to go, how far the interest are going to go. When is this Ukraine war going to stop? What's China going at the moment? Because of course we haven't had great news recently out of them. So that's the sort of still themes that we need to still work out. So from that point of view, I think it's there's still a lot of uncertainty for me. So I'm not buying into this rally. Of course, pretty much consistently saying that I'm just going to be waiting. First of all, at the end of the week, to see how the markets finish up by the end of the Friday and probably Saturday in the US before we make any decisions. But it's just interesting to see the dynamics of the actual markets, what's actually going through, and some of these movement in stocks in the US just been extraordinary. I'll put a couple of charts up in a moment. But for example, Atlassian team was up 14%. There were some other big moves as well. So you can see there's definitely some pent-up demand for some of these really quality stories. And so I'm looking at Nasdaq. I'm looking at movement up of 3.78%, which is quite significant. Now, just with the rates themselves, from Powell, he was talking about having a few more rises. For me, I'm thinking to myself, we're moving from zero, right? So you probably need to have a decent move up before you see any impact if you want to tame inflation. So 0.25, which we saw last night, is not enough. It at least needs to be at 1%. So probably another 3, 4, 5, 6 even movements. I'd say we're getting closer to the 2% rate rise to see probably some sort of impacts on the markets. Now, how the markets behave with that's the unknown. We don't know how, what sort of stories are going to be the ones that you should be sticking to. And how the markets are going to maybe take some of these tech stocks, for example. So from that point of view, it's all in front of us, and we're going to see and follow the markets and follow the themes. All right, so let's have a look at some of these commodity stories, which again, fairly mixed overnight. If I'm looking at what's actually happening in the energy space, so we've got crude again slightly down. Not as bad as previous days, but it's still not looking fantastic. Natural gas is up. But other than that, the other thing I suppose we look at here is uranium. And I'll talk about a little uranium stocks that had a pretty interesting announcement yesterday. But, that's looking fairly bearish this week. But remember, again, we've got a whole week to go through to see how these things happen. We had a really strong move. It's still up for the month, with the war. But this week it hasn't been a great week. So we're just going to see how that actually settles. Any trades you might have, of course, tighten the stops. If you get booted out at the end of the week, so be it. Hopefully taking some profits along the way. Let's have a look at gold, which I talked about yesterday that I think the key for me support is $1,900, and that's holding for the moment. We've got a slight movement back up again to 1926 today. Silver is up as well, so is platinum. Iron ore, by the looks of things, this is trading economics, of course, we're looking at. It is down to 136. I'm not sure if this is up to date or not, but that's still, it's still elevated, but not as good as it was maybe a week ago. So that maybe could be weighing this week on the markets. Copper is nice to see, up 2.4% this morning, which is excellent. And of course, nickel is the other one. And we talked about it yesterday that the LME shut down the actual exchange. They've reopened it last night. They put in some mechanism in it so it doesn't spike up again by 100% in a day. So it only can fall or rise in very small increments. But unfortunately, straight away, it got into suspension again because, of course, the market's volatile in nickel at the moment. So I think, given day by day, I'd say it's probably going to start falling. We might get triggered to stop the big falls, but even in incremental falls, it probably start falling back to some sort of normality, what we had before that huge spike on that short squeeze. So expect nickel to moderate over the next few days, weeks maybe. But still, look, it's still positive overall. Overall picture for me for a lot of these commodities is still positive, especially when you see the actual underlying fundamentals of the commodities still pretty good. I know it's been driven in part by the Russia-Ukraine. So that's, the little bit of FOMO in there, of course, as well. So again, you expect that to moderate over time once we see a little bit of clarity, maybe what's happening with Russia and Ukraine. And then let's actually quickly just talk about that, because we've seen maybe there's a little bit more positive movement towards peace talks with Russia and Ukraine. I saw Erdogan from Turkey flying to Russia to sort of broker some sort of peace talks. I know there's been some concessions from both sides, possibly. So, look, we're inching closer by the looks of things, but whether that we're going to get it imminently, I'm not so sure again. But at least we're getting closer. Even if it's going to be an arduous process to get there. So for now, for me, status quo, war still pretty strong. There's still shelling. There's still, unfortunately, casualties. And unless there is definite some sort of flagging of a ceasefire, then I just don't see a relief at the moment coming through for some of these commodities, maybe. But look, as soon as we get something, I suppose then you will probably see the commodity prices maybe start to come back to some sort of normality. When I say some sort of normality, the big spikes that we've seen, that's going to probably ease off. But like I said, overall underlying fundamentals are still strong, because the actual, I suppose when you look at the US, it's still growing quite strongly. You see some other parts still starting to go strongly. And if there is a ceasefire, we have to rebuild. So we're going to have to rebuild Ukraine and so on. So I'm still liking that space. I don't think I'm going to be shying away from it in the short term anyway. All right, let's look at some of the other, obviously, commodities that we normally talk about. So you've got aluminium still pretty good. Zinc is still good. Tin is still pretty good as well. So pretty much across the board, like I said, the nickel one is probably going to be down because of that huge spike. It needs to come back probably to the 20,000. So it needs to see a bit more force, but it's going to happen over a few days. Iron ore. Okay, so actually iron ore here, and we've got two different things here. So we've got iron ore here is down 136, but here we've got iron ore is up. So I'm thinking I'm going to use this one as the proper one. Iron ore Fe6 148. So that's a big jump, 4%. So that looks actually quite good. So I expect BHP and Rio to be doing quite well. We'll have a look at that again in a moment. And some of the other stuff like let me see, lead, that's slightly down today, but generally speaking, it's not a bad day for the commodity space. All right, so let's have a look at some of the charts now. So I'm just going to swap screens for you right now and go to my Reuters, and here you go. And we're going to first of all have a look at all of that and have a look at the announcements, and then we'll go through some charts. So the announcement from yesterday, actually, we're going to go through BOE, which is Boss Energy. It's probably one of our favorites, if you can call it a favorite, because, you know, uranium space is fairly difficult. It is one of our probably top picks, let's call it, in the space, because it's the one that's might get up and running and gets, I might, you know, the quickest than everyone else. So that's the reason why we like it. It's also here in Australia, which gives us comfort. It's not some jurisdiction that could just pull the rug from under you overnight. You know, could happen, of course, here as well, but the chances are much, much, much lower. And, you know, we can monitor it much, much closer. So from that point of view, great announcement yesterday. And it seems like they're going to be possibly maybe a producer within the next 18 to 24 months. So the equity raising they did was over about $200-something million. That should fund them to getting closer to production, which is the key. So that's one of the biggest boxes you can tick possibly, as you can see here. So that all looks pretty positive. So if you're going to be trading, this is one of the stories we're probably looking at. So I'm going to go have a look at the charts now of these things. So we can just see where they're actually at the moment. And we saw, obviously, uranium chart wasn't fantastic. Sorry, uranium price wasn't fantastic today. But, you know, I think overall, the uranium price is still doing quite well. So if I just click on that for a second, just to get there and have a quick look. Bear with me for one moment. Oops, I'm going to get rid of that. So BOE, you can see yesterday we talked about it. It's still looking decent. I don't mind this chart at all. So like I said, positive announcement. It should theoretically hold that support right here. And if we still have a positive uranium space, and if you look at that announcement from yesterday, they talked about that their actual all-in costs, sustainable costs, AISC, is around $25 per pound. Now, the current spot rate is around $50, right? So they are one of the, looks like on paper, one of the better, cheaper producers if they can get there on those numbers. So from that point of view, that's what's even more attractive about BOE. So if you're going to be trading it, this is probably the one that I'll be looking at. All right, so the next one. So we talked about BOE. Next one is IHR, had a pretty positive announcement as well today. You know, I've talked about yesterday and the day before about looking at and creating some sort of a watch list to look at some of these tech stocks. We saw some huge rally on the tech stocks in the US. It's probably going to do something similar here in Australia as well. And there's a lot of oversold stocks in Australia. Whisper is one that just straight, you know, goes straight top of my mind that it is going to be one to definitely have a look at. And I'm going to have a look at that in a moment, the chart. But as you can see, just on IHR with an announcement, it's starting to pivot. Of course, it's not enough for us. It's still below trend line, so we're still not interested. But we are, you know, we need to look at these stories. We need to see this first signs that it's telling us, you know, the boxes that are being ticked, it's telling us to get in, we will get in. So this one is looking not bad, but let's have a look at Whisper. And let's see where that's at the moment. And again, that one that's been really oversold. Again, very similar. It's come back. It's swinging. But again, you remember, it's still under trend lines. There's still not enough momentum. It's just a little bottom picking from a few investors out there. But I like that. At least it seems to have maybe found that bottom around at 150. It's bounced off. So really closely monitoring it, and it does look pretty cheap. So one on the watch list for sure. Let's have a look at another one. RDY, another one could come out announcement this morning. So we've got one that's come up with a small acquisition. Another one that we like, and it's very similar again. Come back, swinging. We wanted, this one's even closer for us to as a possible buy. It's again cheap. So as long as quick as it gets over that 320, maybe 325, 330, we'll be looking to accumulate that. But it's still, it's just a little bit too early for me. So maybe next week will be the ones to have a look at, because we need to have a follow through, right? One day of rally on the NASDAQ, it's not enough for us. We need to see maybe 1 or 2 weeks of a pretty good price action for us to see that. We want to see that longer term momentum return, not just the daily momentum. We want to see some sort of follow through. So yeah, hopefully tomorrow we'll see a good day. And next week, if we start off on the right foot, maybe that's the time to have a look at some of these stories. All right, let's look at the NASDAQ, what had actually happened last night on that. Because we talked about it, it was a huge jump, but I just want to see the actual chart of it. And you can see that's a nice big green candle, right? So obviously that big rally, and maybe, like I said, this could be the support. You know, maybe we don't have to come back to the 10,000. We'll see. Could be short-lived, like I said, but at least it's nice and positive. So we got a couple of days to go still tonight, and of course Friday for the NASDAQ. But that's encouraging. So let's have a look where it takes us. Okay, let's have a look more announcements. So one that I saw was pause in the actual commodity space. That's a nickel play. That looks okay. The good news about it today was they've got a collaboration with another company to develop a battery, I suppose. Let me see what it's called here. It's called a cathode active material refinery, right? So that's what they want to do here. They received 120 million odd from the federal Australian government to advance the hub, the refinery hub. So that's a big win for POS and its partner in PBT, Pure Battery Technologies. So if, you know, when you receive 120 million bucks grant from the Aussie government, that's a big thing. So that's a positive for it, and it's good to see that we might be able to see an industry, growing industry in Australia on that side. So the chart doesn't look too flash, so not for me to trade it, but one to watch again. They're not going to produce to probably 2023. I'd say they still have to, like I said yesterday, they still have to do the DFS, but all in all, another box tick for them. So that's positive. Now, what the movers and shakers are. So I'm looking at 40X, and I'll show you that why. The reason why I'm looking at that is that there was an announcement today, and it had a big spike today to 90 cents. Is I think they've deployed the scanner in a hospital, so it's going operational. That's a big milestone for the company 40X. So there's a bit of a spike now. Of course, commercialization is a huge thing for companies that are tech stocks, that are, you know, developing new technologies, they're developing maybe new services. So from that point of view, it's obviously a big thing. That's why it's jumped. It's too early for us. We want to see more sales come through, more consistent sales come through. So, but it's interesting to see what's happening. So I'll just revert back to actually the movers and shakers. So this is my watch list, right? I'm seeing what else is moving. We've had ABX as well. They've had an announcement too. So let's just have a look what's actually causing that spike today. But just looking at the actual watch list, as you can see, there's a few tech stocks, not unexpectedly, of course, because of the rally we had on the NASDAQ. So if you can look at the ABX, they had today first in human study progress update. So the biotechs are looking like a flavor of the day today as well, and that looked like a positive announcement as well. But really nothing to get excited about today from me. Looking at a story I'm going to get in, there is nothing that stood out for me from actual announcements. So I'm still holding my fire. I'm going to probably have a look at some of these tech stocks again today to see what is moving up, see what is cheap, see what else I can add to the watch list. And you can see there's a few on there that are, you know, up 5% plus. I mean, my watch list, this is just a part of it, and it's 4.5% from the bottom up. So that's a definite move on some of these really interesting stories. Let's have a quick look at Altium actually and Xero, because they're the two big ones that are actually moving. And you can see Altium is still below trend, so we're not interested in that. Let's have a look at Xero. And that, again, that's at least it's pivoting. So this is way too early for us, but it's just nice to see that little bit of greenness we haven't seen for a little while. Can it come through with it next week? So too early to get in. Patience, I think, is the key here. All right, I think I've covered pretty much everything I need to talk about today. So again, thanks very much, guys, for listening to me since I'm on my own. Dave will be back next week. Still got another day, and tomorrow we've got to ask the analyst, so please join me for that. But have a good day, good trading if you're trading, and let's see if we can spot some more interesting ideas for maybe next week. Cheers, guys.